good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to another episode.
Working on OpenShift
and sometimes
we haven't.
This is so awesome.
We are an open culture that believes
It's actually
in
a big piece of the component for your GitOps work.
Everybody has something that they can say.
On top of the Red Hat portfolio. All right, and we are live. Cool. So, welcome everyone to GitOps Guide to the Galaxy. I will be your captain in this journey, Christian Hernandez, technical marketing here at Red Hat. Again, co-captain is you this time. We're back from an extended break, and not only are we back from an extended break, we came out an hour earlier. We to make room for In the Clouds. In the Clouds had a special guest, right? And so we just we moved the show for an hour. But next time we'll be back at our usual time. So fret not. Again, apologize for technical issues. We have a big topic today. We're talking about originally when I decided to do this this stream, this topic. I was thinking about doing it in terms of Argo CD and how to do your directory structure for Argo CD in a way that's GitOps compliant. And I figured, you know what? How about I just show you instead of just talking about it, right? And so that's why I kind of just, renamed this show or kind of rethought this topic and say, hey, I'm gonna do a directory structure from scratch. So I'm gonna get right to it. I do have a hard stop today, unfortunately. So this will be a shorter show. If I'm going too fast, that is why. If I don't get to your questions, that's why. But and again, forward apologizing. I'm going to go really, really fast. So for those of you who are new to not only to the show but also to GitOps, this might go over your head a little bit. So just kind of fair warning. It's going to be a lot. Don't worry. I do have resources that you guys can take a look at afterwards. So let me start here by sharing my screen. Share my screen. Which one? This guy here. Oops. I never know which one to share. 1 second. Yes, this one. Okay. There's only 3 of them. I don't know why I ever get confused. So 1 second here. I'm going to share my screen. All right, perfect. So right before I jump in, little things I want you guys to realize that one, GitOps Con is coming. We're doing it again. We loved it so much. We're doing GitOps Con a second time. Again, in person. This will be an in-person event co-located with KubeCon in Valencia, Spain. So GitOps Con is happening in 17 weeks. Looks like there's a countdown here saying, it's 17 weeks away, which just seems crazy. We better start planning. And also the CFP is open as well, right? And so the CFP link should be on. There it is, right here. CFP is open. We are having 2 tracks this time, so feel free to submit as much as you want, right? We're actually going to have more room. We had to make difficult decisions last time for GitOps Con about what we will accept, what we won't accept. But this time we're casting a wider net because CNCF gave us 2 rooms. That's how popular it was here in North America. So we hopefully will recapture that, right? Hopefully we'll make it even bigger. We hope it'll be bigger because we got 2 rooms. So GitOps Con, there's the link. I dropped it in the chat. Their CFP is open, so feel free to submit as much as you want. On top of that, another event we're having in February. So February 9th, we are having Red Hat is sponsoring OpenShift Commons. So for those of you who don't know, OpenShift Commons is where the community of users of OpenShift and OKD get together. It's kind of an upstream community that is sponsored by Red Hat. We are having a GitOps day, right? So GitOps Commons gathering on OpenShift Commons gathering on GitOps So, and there you can see we're gonna have our friends Cornelia and Dan, right, from Amazon and CodeFresh. They've been on the show before. They're coming back. Members of the OpenShift GitOps, sorry, of the Open GitOps community will be there as well. It's gonna be on February 9th. So it's open virtual, right? So it's virtual. Got to say that, right? Unlike GitOpsCon. This gathering is virtual, so from wherever you are, it's free to attend. It's free online. Get to know the community. I'll be there, right? I'll be kind of doing an expansion of what I'm doing today, is right how to get started with GitOps. So be sure to check that out. So moving right along at a 10,000 miles per hour pace. So the idea here is I get a lot of questions, and not only do I get a lot of questions, but also our here at Red Hat, our solutions architects and consultants, and even in the upstream, right? Even in the OpenShift OpenShift GitOps. There's too many words with open. Open GitOps community, right? The Open GitOps working group. We get this question a lot. The question is, okay, I'm buying into GitOps. I played around with Argo CD. I played around with Flux. I played around with ACM. How should I structure my repo? Right. And so, there's a lot of opinions out there. There's a lot of kind of best practices. And I figured that I would do a show on like, how do I create a repo when, when doing GitOps, right? And so the idea is let me drop down to my CLI here. If I do an OC get nodes, right? I have a Kubernetes cluster, in this case, OpenShift. Right, I just installed this day one, right? So if I do OC get pod /a Argo, there's no Argo or any GitOps controller on there. So the idea being that I have a clean cluster. How does Christian get started? And I figure that I will kind of give my best practices / how do I do things here in a way that is repeatable, right? So anytime I do something, I like, you as your DevOps practitioners, you as GitOps folk, you want to do things that's repeatable, right? And so that's kind of like the idea I have. Also, I want to do the idea of that is agnostic to the GitOps controller, right? So here at Red Hat, we're all in on Argo CD. OpenShift GitOps is based on Argo CD. But people like using Flux. There's tons of Flux users out there. Flux is a certified operator on OpenShift. So I want to, I don't want to like box myself into any particular GitOps controller. So this is how I get started. This is specific to Argo CD OpenShift GitOps, but it's essentially you can modify this to use it for Flux as well. A lot of this is based on the work that some of the internal architects you guys heard me mention before, Gerald, right? One of the great Canadians that I worked with. A lot of it's based on that. A lot of it's based on the stuff I've done with work I've done with Flux, the work I've done with Argo Autopilot, and I kind of just mashed it all together to make it work for me specifically. One caveat is this design is specific to one cluster, meaning that this is a one-to-one relationship. I have one repo that's pointing to one cluster, right? One repo is managing one cluster. The design changes as you get into like, let's say mono repo, where you're doing one repo for many clusters, or if you're doing like poly repo sort of design where it's many repos to many clusters and you're mix and matching. So I decided to start simple, a one-to-one. I have one cluster. How do I do my GitOps directory structure here? So first things first, as always, create a new repository, right? Create a new repo. We're doing this from scratch, right? So with warts and everything, with mistakes and all, this is how I do it, right? And so here we'll call this see here, something fun. So let's have let's call this well, let's call this Loki repo, right? Whatever. It's one of the Marvel shows I like. So for those who watch Marvel, GitOps repo example for Twitch streaming fun. Ports and all. right? Let's make. I like to add a README, right? It's just. So I have this repo, brand new. You get, you don't get any newer than this, and I just clone it locally. So let's do this. So I have no directory here. Git clone. So let's go to right. There's there Loki repo. If Andrew's watching, he'd probably just laugh that I just did the dir command. One of the things that that I also do at Red Hat is that I'm not only the GitOps TMM, but I'm also the Windows Containers TMM. Two of the weirdest things, unrelated, but so that's why you saw me do dir, because I just spent some time on a Windows server. So, right, it's just the README where it's square one. Great things, right? So, when, where, or how to get started is, or how to initiate something onto a cluster, how to get something onto the cluster is something that's commonly referred to as Bootstrap, right? So bootstrapping. So this is, which is why I always create a directory called Bootstrap, right? So I have a directory called Bootstrap, and that's kind of like where I'll put all my things, where I how I bootstrap a cluster, or how I'm going to bootstrap this cluster, is that this is where all the artifacts go in there. So in the Bootstrap directory, I use customize. So for those of you who aren't familiar with customize, or this is your first time, I'll put a link here in the chat if I can find it. There we go. So if you've missed past episodes, feel free to check that out. I talk about customize a lot. And the reason I use customize is I use the dry method. Don't repeat yourself. Chris Short, who was an original host here for GitOps Guide to the Galaxy, who since left Red Hat. He actually joked, because we still keep in touch. He actually joked, don't repeat yourself, is don't repeat YAML. Either way, the acronym works. The 3-letter acronym works, is don't repeat yourself. So I have, so I'm going to use customize for that. So customize. So I'm going to have a base directory here, and I'm going to have overlays as well. So let's back up here. Let's do a tree. Oh, warts and all, I messed up. I actually like to create a directory above this directory. So let's do that. So what I like to do is I like to create a directory, and I name this directory the same as the cluster name. So for example, if I do an OC get machine sets, right? This is the cluster name of this cluster that I'm doing. So in order to get that, I just grab that cluster name, which is that guy here, and I create a directory there. And then I move Bootstrap into cluster 1. Okay, so recap. Tree. Let's do. So I have the cluster name, which is the cluster I'm going to deploy to. And then if I do a tree, I have inside this directory, I have Bootstrap, a base, and an overlay. All right, so far so good. All right, let that sink in a little bit. So I have this directory here. And then what I do is that inside of Bootstrap, so let's create a file. Let me do touch, even though I can just VI it. Base. Here I do, inside of the Bootstrap base directory, I do everything that I put all the YAMLs that it takes to install the GitOps controller. In this case, it's going to be OpenShift GitOps. But this doesn't have to be OpenShift GitOps. It can be, Argo CD, it could be Flux, whatever. But in this specific use case, this is where I put in how to install the GitOps controller. And in this case, we're using OLM, right? So we're using the operator. So in our case, that means that we just have to subscribe, right? We have to add a subscription. So clear out of this. Once I do a tree again, right? So in base, I have this file. So let's modify this file, right? And then I want to go fast. I have this here off to the side, but right, I just put in, and you can find this in the official OpenShift documentation. So this is how I get the operator installed, right? OpenShift GitOps operator installed. So again, I'm going to do this a lot. Tree, right? So here I got my base in there, and this is the installation manifest for OpenShift GitOps. This can have as many files as needed, right? For Argo CD, it can be a few dozen files, or you can have one file with all your YAMLs in them, right? But since I'm using customize, I have to create a customization file. So that I'm going to go over under Bootstrap overlays. Actually, I have to create a directory there first, and I'll tell you why in a second. Overlays default, right? Quick recap, right? Overlays is basically where you start your deployment from, and it reads from base. And you'll see how this works in a little bit. If you're not used to customize, don't worry, this will make sense as you go along. So Bootstrap overlays default. And then here, you have to have a customization file. First, you have to have a customization file in base. Sorry, Bootstrap base customization, right? And here, you need to list any files you want to include. In our case, is OpenShift GitOps subscription. So again, tree. In Bootstrap base, we have how to install it, which is a subscription installation YAML. Could be one or many YAMLs. And in the customization file, so if I, that I basically am listing everything, right? If I had multiple YAMLs, I would have to list those YAMLs individually. So that's the base. That's how I install the operator. Inside of overlays, right? Inside of overlays, so let's go over here. Yeah. So inside of overlays, let me do a tree, and I'll talk to the tree. Talking to trees, we're talking to nature here. So inside overlays, inside the default is specific configuration for the GitOps controller for this cluster. So while this is like a generic Bootstrap, the cluster itself, its specific configurations for the GitOps controller will go into default. So this takes two things. So one, I do let me touch the installation file. So I touch cluster Bootstrap overlays default. I'm touching the OpenShift GitOps Argo CD instance. So I do a tree. That's how that looks like. So here, this is actual instantiation of Argo CD, or the Argo CD controller. So here, again, it's easier if I just copy paste what I have here. My magic off-screen thing. Don't worry about too much what's in here. It's just know that this is an instance of Argo CD. Right, so clear tree. Let's clear that tree again. So here, to recap, base has the subscription, and overlays has OpenShift GitOps Argo CD instantiated. Another thing that's needed, at least for me, the way I do it, you don't have to do it this way, but I do it this way. So you can change this if you like. Also, I need to set some RBACs. I always set, some people disagree with me, and I disagree with that disagreement, but I always give cluster admin to Argo CD. Because if I'm doing GitOps, everything is driven via Git workflows. So it doesn't matter if this controller has cluster admin. It needs, like, how can you deploy something onto a cluster if it doesn't have access to deploy? So disagree, that's cool. Put in the chat if you disagree. I'm happy to disagree with you live. So cool. So we have base that installs the operator, and we have the default, which has specific configuration for this particular cluster. Again, just like the base, you need to have a customization file. So let's touch overlays default. I always misspell customization. I don't know if it's like 1K or 2. It looks like it's just 1K. Okay. And then here, a few things, right? So first, let's put the header, the GVK, because that's always important. And then resources. So the resources, let's go back. Resources is basically the name of the files, right? These two files that I want to include, which I do have copied over here. It's just an array, right? So here you can see an example of like, hey, load this, load this. But this won't work without, if I go back here saying, hey, in the overlay, say, hey, I need you to, read that in. So I need to do that as a base. And then there we go. So here is actually, this is, I would say, if you don't leave, if you with anything else except for this, this is actually pretty good starting point. This is actually viable, and you can probably just start here. So if I do a customize a build of cluster Bootstrap overlays default, this will basically apply everything that we created. So we created the subscription, which you see is down here, which is there. We created the RBAC policy, which is here, and then the Argo CD instance, which is there. And so this is actually enough to get started. But I like to add a few things on top of this, right? And this is kind of like where the genesis of like, okay, cool, this is cool to get started, but like, where, how do the experts do it, right? And so let's do a quick tree. The next thing, so this is actually done in terms of bootstrapping. So Bootstrap is done. So, oops, I do this here, right? So it's just cluster. Oops, in the wrong screen. There you're right. It's just right now I just have Bootstrap on the top level directory. So I'm going to create something else, and if Gerald, if you're watching this here, you'll recognize it. You'll recognize this. Create directory cluster, and I'm going to create a directory called components, right? And so in the components directory, if I can find my notes here, yeah. So in components, components means different things to different people, right? And to Gerald, it probably means something different to him than to me. To me, components are things that you need in order for the GitOps controller to work, or things that you do in order for the GitOps controller to function the way you want it to function, right? So so for me, I like using application sets. So where do I store my application sets? I store them in components. Cluster components, and then here let's do, I believe I called this app sets or application sets. Good question. Components, application sets. I do other things that could go in here are things like Argo CD projects, right? So as you know, Argo CD app projects are independent of OpenShift projects there. So that the way that looks like, it's like this here. So that's where those individual components go. And so, for instance, here, let's have an example of let's touch cluster component. Create that directory. Components, Argo CD project. Okay, so let's touch components, Argo CD project, and here I'm gonna list I'll do test project, right? Here, so here I put like a configuration like I'm gonna create a project inside of Argo CD, for instance. I'll have that there. So the way that looks is like that, right? And just like everything else, remember we're using customize. What does that require? This was a workshop in or training or a class or something. I would this is where everyone out loud says customization.yaml file, right? So this is you need a customization.yaml file because we're using customize all the way through. In an episode I called customization files rat droppings because that's kind of how it is in your repo. You're just going to see this all over your repo. Get used to it. It's fun. It actually it makes you, even though it feels like more YAML, it actually makes you write less YAML. Cool. So let's tree this. You have this, right? So how do you load the components into your Bootstrap directory, right? You remember we have the Bootstrap directory. That's the point of entry. How does that get loaded, right? So if I clear this and I do a build, you're gonna have you notice how the Argo CD project isn't included here. So essentially, the answer to that question is you're gonna have to update this customization file. So if I do cluster bootstrap overlays default customization, in here you're gonna have to add the Argo CD project as a base. And so now when you do a build, it'll include the Argo CD project as part of that build, right? And so let's take a look at this here. So as you can see, the more and more we go through, the more and more you're going to see that a lot of these steps are repetitive, right? And so because it's essentially you're going to create a directory with all the manifests, and you're going to just reference it from something else, and then reference it for something else, right? It's going to chain together. There will be a point of entry where you make changes, and everything else basically chains off of that. And so that's kind of how you have the customize, how to use customize in order to one, write less YAML, and two, how to reference things to other components. And so here, I'm kind of wondering here, I do have, I wonder what would be the best way to like just do the application sets and then show you why, or do the other directories and then go back to the application sets. So let's do the latter, right? So let's do, so the next directory, so we're going to come back to components, application sets. We're going to, right, so here we have Bootstrap and components. The next directory I like to create is something that I've kind of went back and forth of what to call this, is what I actually call this core. And oops. The reason I call this core is because this is where all the core components for this cluster to run, right? So like all the core components, all the cluster configurations, all the all this sort of thing like IDP configurations, right? LDAP configurations, right? Things for like admin-y stuff. I put it in core, and this, I'm actually not 100% married to this name, but it's basically there almost as a placeholder um, for um, in case someone else gets um, a better idea, right? Or I find something better. So, yeah. So, Gerald, right? Thanks for joining us. He says, do you always use the actual cluster name in the repo name? Do I always? No. So if I want something that's like completely repeatable, maybe something that's completely agnostic to the cluster, I just call it cluster. And um, and so and the reason for that is the reason for that is for what you said. In case the cluster gets redeployed, I can just, I don't have to do any weird renaming. If So yeah, you don't absolutely have to, right? I just did it for this demo, but sometimes I'll just call it cluster, right? If it's like so generic that it gets deployed multiple times, I just call it cluster. So and Gerald says he uses config instead of core, but yeah, he's not 100% on it either. I'm not either. So so here inside of core, I'll create a directory per thing, and I don't know what else to call it. Maybe someone else will figure it out. It'll make sense once I do it. I do a GitOps controller. The reason I do a GitOps controller is because, again, I wanted to make this as agnostic as possible. Because whether you're doing Argo CD, OpenShift GitOps, or Flux, it's the same design. So why name it something specific? You can change it to Argo CD. You can change it to OpenShift GitOps. I just use GitOps controller. So here I do GitOps controller inside of this directory. And in here, this is a very, very simple. There's only one file in here. And it's, let me touch it. And it's, you guessed it, a customization file. And so in here, it's a very simple file. It actually, it's actually just one line, or one config. Actually, it's basically saying, hey, load everything in from default. So the reason why this is here, it's going to seem, you're going to think this seems kind of redundant, Christian, and it is. A few reasons, right? One is that this is the application set is going to deploy. It's going to point to this directory, and I'll show you in a bit how that works. And that's one. And two, this is how Argo, or the GitOps controller, in our case Argo CD, is going to manage itself, right? So you want not only Argo CD to deploy, but you want Argo CD to manage itself as well. And so with this conforms to the GitOps principle, right? You don't want your application or application sets definitions to be independent of outside of the GitOps workflow. So and so you can test this by doing customize, build cluster core. Cluster core GitOps controller, right? And you see that it'll build just fine, right? Because it's just, again, let me clear the screen. And it's just pointing up to the Bootstrap directory, right? And so this seems, I 100% agree. This seems like overkill, right, for one repo. And the reason I'm doing it this way is just plain and simply instill good habits. Because if I'm doing something like a mono repo, right, where I have one repo and many clusters, I'll actually move Bootstrap and overlays outside of cluster, right? And so it'll actually live one directory up. And if we have time, doesn't seem like we will, but if we have time, I'll show you how that looks like. But in this, so here you'll see cluster, and then you'll see Bootstrap living outside of cluster. So, and then that way you'll have those individual configurations. So so again, running out of time, so I'm going to go super fast. So how do I load core into the cluster, right? So this goes back to the application sets. So in the application set, I have an application set. Like, let's see if I can touch this file real quick. touch, cluster, components, application sets, and then core components. Right here, I have an application set. And this application set points to, if you're not familiar with application sets, we did a show about application sets. Remember, watch if you haven't seen it. So application set is this configuration. The important thing to realize here is that one, this configuration here, line 12, is basically saying, hey, every directory you find in core, deploy that as an application. And so a few changes need to be made here. So first of all, the Loki repo, right? Loki repo, we need to change that. And then we need to change the name, which I can see now, Gerald. This is where Gerald's point comes across. Its name is cluster1, right? That's why I had those placeholders there. If this just said cluster, I didn't have to change that. So, but remember, again, your mileage may vary. So cool. So now we have those. We have that application set just like every other directory that we have on here. What do we need? Class, what do we need? We need a customization file. If I can paste it correctly. Go. Customization file. And then the easiest thing is that we have core components on in this repo. So that's one thing. Cool. So now, just like let's do a tree to see where we are. So there we got a core. We got application sets, right? That had that has the core components listed in the customization file. We need to tell the overlay, just like before, just like we did with this guy, with the Argo CD projects. We need to tell the overlay how to load those in. So that would be under cluster, Bootstrap, overlays, default, customization. We have application sets here. And this is just as simple as telling it to load, right? And so let's clear that. Let's do a tree. So here, if you can see here, the overlays default customization points to both the application sets and Argo CD project. So if I do a build now, not only do I have the Argo CD project, but it also sets up application set. So if I make a change to this application set for whatever reason, right, maybe I want to turn off self-heal, Argo CD would automatically load that in when I make that change in this repo. So the next component, final component, is something that Gerald got me into, right? So this is another Gerald special. Let's cluster, right? I have core components. The next top level one will be something called, Gerald, can you guess it? You guessed it before? Tenants, right? So tenants, what's the difference between tenants and core? Core is the core functionality of the cluster. Tenants are your workloads, right? You can call this app, you can call this workloads, you can call this whatever you want. I call them tenants because I have a cluster and an app running. An app running on my cluster could be short-lived, long-lived. So it's like a tenant, right? You can think of it as a kind of an apartment, right? So the apartment complex is the core, right, cluster, and the tenants are just your tenants. 100%. I'm not a fast enough typer, is what Gerald says. 100% same functionality as core, meaning that let's give a good example. So if I go, I have here I have an example here. Let's go to get a example. I have something called my app, right? So I have my app, which is a bunch of YAML for my application, right? Nothing funny there. So let's copy that to tenant. Right. So I have my app there, and this is just just a dumb welcome hello world app. So in order to load tenants, I basically do the same thing as I did with core. Is I create an application set for it. So if I do cluster components, application set, and this application set, I think I called it tenants. Yes, I did. Where's my notes? Tenants app set. Beautiful. This app set looks exactly the same as core. So and you need to make the same changes here. So let's do Loki repo, and then what do we call this cluster? Cluster blah blah blah. And then there we go. So same thing. Anytime anytime I add a directory to this here, it'll create an application because of the application set. So since I'm already loading in the application set, oh wait, the one thing I need to do, I'm pointing at the screen as if you know what I'm pointing at. One thing I do need to do is I need to add the tenant app set to the application set customization, right? Because nothing happens without customization. All right, so let's do a build. I didn't want to do a build of that. I wanted to. Oh, actually, that would work. So here, not only do I get an application set for the core configuration, which is somewhere here. Yeah, for the core configuration, I also get it for tenants as well, right? And so that is, in a nutshell, we're essentially done here. Let's go. Let's do a tree. We're essentially done here. And so this is like the good base here of how to do it. So, moment of truth, right? As you guys were all thinking, moment of truth is how do you apply this? First, I have to commit it. Add everything. Git commit. I want to sign it. Gerald. Your name Gerald is cool. Right. Oops. Come on. There we go. I'll git push. It's committed, right? It's in this repo. So if you reload this repo, it's here, right? And then you can see the tree outlined here. Is this? There's no expand all, right? Here for I don't know if you guys use Octotree. Anyways, so yeah, so Gerald's cool. Initial commit, we're all there. And the way you apply this is basically, as some of us say, that shell is the. But make sure to let my kid know I'm cool. Yeah, this is kind of a shell is the new language of GitOps, right? And so you're going to do an until loop. So until OC apply -k, and you want to do the cluster Bootstrap overlays default. So until that happens, what are we going to do? Until that happens, oops, sleep. I forgot to do. Is there? Let me see something. Until I should do carriage returns, right? Until OC apply. This guy do sleep 3 done. Right. So the reason you have to do an until loop is because you get errors like this where the operator needs to install the CRDs, right, the custom resource definitions first in order for the CRs to work, right? And this will take a little bit because OLM takes a while. Like if you're doing like straight Flux or straight Argo CD, it might go a little faster because we don't have to wait for OLM. But this basically can be done with Shell, right? The bootstrapping process can be done with Shell. It can be done with like Terraform, Ansible, right? Pick your favorite tool. Personally, I like using Helm for bootstrapping because you can make it pretty agnostic, and it's just it's just one of the better tools for bootstrapping, I would say, right? Because that's what it's used for. So cool. So we're all here. So that was applied. So if I do OC get pods, OpenShift GitOps, right, you see that we're running. So if I do an OC get apps, you see that there's two apps running, app sets, right? And so let's go to, let's look at the, where is the route? Get the route. I don't know what my password was. Hold on. Cool. We like self-signed certificates. As you can see, it's a brand new cluster. Like I didn't even say Brave, right? I probably do this out of. I have the password somewhere here, if I can find it. Found it. Clear this. I'll bring it back. All right, we're back. And the password is in there. So one last thing before before I close it out. I'm actually kind of late for my other meeting, but I just kind of want to do one more thing. So here, tree. So this is enough to get started, right? Your next question is, okay, so how do I add workloads? So let's say I'm an admin and I want to add something in core, right? I wanted to add something in I want to add the yeah, there we go, the container security operator, right? Because that's a good example because it's an easy thing. All you need to do in order to add workloads here, let's say I'm an admin and I want to add the container security operator, right? So if I do mkdir core and then container security operator, right there, I will just touch the file of the YAML I want to load in. Actually, this is probably enough for it to work. But as you all know, we're being good citizens. We need to actually add one more thing. And as you guessed it, it's a common theme. Customization file is what we need. And then here, it's just as simple as just loading in that file, right? This actually doesn't, technically speaking, you don't actually need this file because application sets will just work the way it is. But I like to be consistent. And so here, so all I did here was I added a directory and I added two files, right? So if I do a git diff, git status, right? So I added this directory and I added that file in the customization file. So git add, now can I do a git diff? Git commit, it's probably a way to do that. Here, adding CSO, right? Container security operator, git push. Okay, so all I did was I added a directory here. It's going to take a while. It might take a minute to, I may kick it a little bit, but because the reconciliation loop is 3 minutes, so hopefully we either caught it right before the 3 minutes, If we caught it right after, we have to wait a whole 3 minutes. But the idea here is that I just commit my application, and the reconciliation loop will then, the application set will then pick up that directory and deploy the application. I may hard reset this app here. There it is. So it created the container security operator application, right? Just by adding. So like if I wanted to add a workload, right, I would just put it in tenant. So for example, let's do something simple. And then let's do that into cluster 1, tenants. Right, I added in tenants, I added another directory, and in tenants, right, specific for this right here, you can do whatever. Notice that there's a customization file. In this customization file, I'm actually loading in another repo. So this kind of shows you can still have your directory, but can still host the repo in other repos. So anything's possible because this is it's customized, right? We git push, we wait, and we wait. Pick it. Yeah. So and then it just adds, right? So essentially, what the application sets gives you is that it'll just deploy over and over and over again. So someone asked, very good question. So does this folder structure and YAML files work with any Kubernetes distro? The answer is yes. Kubernetes, because Kustomize is built into Kubernetes. And so since Kustomize is built into Kubernetes, you'll have this essentially will work with any cluster, right? You can just do Kustomize build and it'll just deploy. Someone says they have a Rancher cluster. Should work with Rancher. I don't know what Rancher's automation is, but if you're using Argo CD, if you're using Flux on it, it should just work, right? It essentially should work with any Kubernetes cluster. I do have examples right here. This example is going to go away because this is kind of my scratch disk. Let's go to yeah, let's go here. Let's go to my repositories. I'm just going to paste these in. I have an example for OpenShift GitOps, Argo, and Flux, right? So if you're going to use OpenShift, there's a repo to get you started. If you're going to use just Kubernetes and Argo, there's another one. And just to show you, because I've done a lot of work with Flux lately, this one, Flux. You'll notice, although I have like 3 separate repos, they're all the same structure. And so the idea is it's just basically a good way to start. So this is how to start. You can change this however you want. So anyway, I'm running late for my next meeting. And so what I'm going to do is I'll follow this up probably with a blog post. We'll keep talking about this. Maybe I'll have Chris Short back on as a guest, ironically, right? Instead of the host, because we've done a lot of work in this Git repo. So anyways, thank you all for joining. I appreciate you. Next time, we're going to start at our usual time. So again, thank you for all your patience. We're going to start at the same time as our usual time, right? 3 p.m. Eastern. And I'm going to have HashiCorp come on and talk about Vault. It's actually going to be a first of a series of episodes, right? So we're not just going to have HashiCorp on once. We're going to have them multiple times to talk about Vault. So anyways, stay safe out there, everyone. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.